state. The Little Minister by J. M. Barrie. Chapter 26. Scene at the Spittal. Within an hour after I had left him, Waster Lunny walked into the schoolhouse and handed me his snuff-mull, which I declined politely. It was with this ceremony that we usually opened our conversations. "I've seen the post," he said, "and he tells me there has been a queer ploy at the Spittal. It's a wonder the marriage hasna been turned into a burial, and all because of that Highland stirk, Lauchlan Campbell." Waster Lunny was a man who had to retrace his steps in telling a story if he tried short-cuts, and so my custom was to wait patiently while he delved through the ploughed fields that always lay between him and his destination. "As you ken, Rintoul's so little of a Scotchman that he's no muckle better than an Englisher. That maun be the reason he hadna mair sense than to tramp on a Highlandman's ancestors as he tried to tramp on Lauchlan's this day." "If Lord Rintoul insulted the piper," I suggested, giving the farmer a helping hand cautiously, "it would be through inadvertence. Rintoul only bought the Spittal a year ago, and until then I dare say he had seldom been on our side of the border." This was a foolish interruption, for it set Waster Lunny off in a new direction. "That's what Elspeth says. Says she, when the Earl has grand estates in England, what for does he come to a barren place like the Spittal to be married? It's gay like, she says, and if he wanted the marriage to be got by quietly, a thing, she says, that no woman can stand. Furthermore, Elspeth says, how has the marriage been postponed twice? We ken what the servants at the Spittal says to that, namely that the young lady is no keen to take him, but Elspeth winna listen to such arguments. She says either the Earl had grown timid, as mony a man does, when the wedding day drew near, or else his sister that keeps his house is mad at the thocht o' losing her place. But as for the young lady's being sweer, says Elspeth, an earl's an earl, however auld he is, and a lassie's a lassie, however young she is, and weel she kens you're near sure of a man's no changing his mind about you till you're tied to him by law, after which it doesna so muckle matter whether he changes his mind about you or no. Ay, there's a quirk in it some gait, dominie, but it's a deep water Elspeth canna bottom." "It is," I agreed. "But you were to tell me what Birse told you of the disturbance at the Spittal." "I will," he answered. "The post puts the white o't on her little ladyship, as they call her, though she winna be a ladyship till the morn. All I can say is that if the Earl was saft enough to do such a thing out of fondness for her, it's time he was married on her, so that he may come to his senses again. That's what I say. But Elspeth counters me, of course, and says she, if the young lady was so careless of insulting other folks' ancestors, it proves she has nane of her ain, for them that has china plates themselves is the maist careful not to break the china plates of others." "But what was the insult? Was Lauchlan dismissed?" "No, thanks. It was waur than that. Dominie, you're dull in the uptake compared to Elspeth. I hadna telled her half the story afore she jaloused the rest. However, to begin again, there's great feasting and rejoicing going on at the Spittal the now, and also a banquet, which the post says is twa dinners in one. Weel, there's a curran Ogilvies among the guests, and it was them that egged on her little ladyship to make the daring proposal to the Earl. What was the proposal? It was no less than that the twa pipers should be ordered to play The Bonny House of Airlie. Dominie, I wonder you can tak it so calm when you ken that's the Ogilvies sang, and that it's aimed at the clan of Campbell." "Pooh," I said. "The Ogilvies and the Campbells used to be mortal enemies, but the feud has been long forgotten." "Ay, I've heard tell," Waster Lunny said sceptically, "that the Airlie and the Argyle shakes hands now like Christians, but I'm thinking that's just afore the Queen. Dinna speak now, for I'm in the thicket. Her little ladyship was all hinging in gold and jewels, the which winna be her ain till the morn, and she leans o'er to the Earl and whispers to him to get the pipers to play The Bonny House. He wasna willing, for says he, there's Ogilvies at the table, and ane of the pipers is a Campbell, and we'll better let sleeping dogs lie. However, the Ogilvies launched at his caution, and he was so infatuated with her little ladyship that he gae in, and he cried out to the pipers to strike up The Bonny House." Waster Lunny pulled his chair nearer me and rested his hand on my knees. Dominie, he said in a voice that fell now and again into a whisper, them looking on swears that when Lauchlan Campbell heard these monstrous orders, his face became ugly and black, so that they kent in a jiffy what he would do. It said a body jumped back frae him in sudden dread, except poor Angus, the other piper, what was busy tuning up for the bonny house. Well, Angus had got no further in the tune than the first skirl when Lauchlan looped at him and ripped out the startled critter's pipes with his dirk. The pipes gae a roar of agony like a stuck swine and fell gasping on the floor. What happened next was that Lauchlan, with his dirk handy for anybody that might try to stop him, marched once round the table, playing the Campbells are coming, and then stalked out of the spittle, his chest far afore him, and his head so weel back that he could see what was going on ahint. Frae the spittle to here he never stopped that fearsome tune, and I's warrant he's blawing away at it at this moment through the streets of Thrums. Waster Lunny was not in his usual spirits, or he would have repeated his story before he left me, for he had usually as much difficulty in coming to an end as in finding a beginning. The drought was to him as serious matter as death in the house, and as little to be forgotten for a lengthened period. There's to be a prayer meeting for rain in the Auld Licht Kirk the night, he told me as I escorted him as far as my side of the Quharity, now almost a dead stream, pitiable to see. And I'm gaen, though I'm sweer to leave thy poor cattle o' mine. You should see how they look at me when I gie them mair of that rotten grass to eat. It's enough to make a man greet, for what right hae to keep kye when I cannot meet them. Waster Lunny has said to me more than once that the great surprise of his life was when Elspeth was willing to take him. Many a time, however, I have seen that in him which might have made any weaver's daughter proud of such a man, and I saw it again when we came to the riverside. I'm no ane o' thy farmers, he said truthfully. That's aye girding at the weather. And Elspeth and me kens that we hae been dealt with bountifully since we took this farm with gay, anxious hearts. That woman, Dominie, is enough to put a brave face on a coward, and it's no longer a sign than yestreen when I was sitting in the dumps looking at the aurora borealis, which I canna but regard as a messenger o' woe, that she put her hand on my shoulder and she says, Waster Lunny, 20 years syne we began life together with nothing but the claes on our back, and an it please God we can begin it again. For I hae you and you hae me, and I'm no cast down if you're no. Dominie, is there mony sic a women in the world as that? Many a one, I said. Ay, man, it's shame to me, for I hae a kind o' delight in angering Elspeth, just to see what she'll say. I could hae ta'en her on my knee at that minute, but the bairns was there, and so it wouldna hae done. But I cheered her up, for, after all, the drought canna put us so far back as we was 20 years syne, unless it's true what my father said, that the aurora borealis is the devil's rainbow. I saw it 6 times in July month, and it made me shut my een. You was out admiring it, Dominie, but I can never forget that it was seen in the year 12, just afore the great storm. I was only a laddie then, but I mind how that awful wind stripped a' the standing corn in the glen in less time than we've been here at the water's edge. It was called the Deil's Besom. My father's hindmost words to me was, It's time enough to greet, laddie, when you see the aurora borealis. I mind he was so complete ruined in an hour that he had to apply for relief frae the poor's rate. Think o' that, and him a proud man. He would take nothing till one winter day when we was a starving, and syne I gaed with him to Spearfort, and he telled me to grip his hand tight, so that the coldness o' mine might gie him courage. They were doing out the charity in the town's house, and I had never been in it afore. I canna look at it now without thinking of that day when me and me father gaed up the stair together. Mr. Duthie was presiding at the time, and he was not muckle older than Mr. Dishart is now. I mind he speered for proof that we was needing, and my father couldna speak. He just pointed at me. But you have a good coat on your back yoursel, Mr. Duthie said, for there were mony a waiting, sair needing. It was lended him to come here. I cried, and without a word my father opened the coat, and he saw he had nothing on aneath, and his skin blue with cauld. Dominie, Mr. Duthie handed him 1 shilling and saxpence, and my father's fingers closed greedily on it for a minute, and syne it fell to the ground. They put it back in his hand, and it slipped out again, and Mr. Duthie gave it back to him, saying, "Are you so cold as that?" But, oh man, it wasna cauld that did it, but shame of being on our rates. The blood ran through my father's head, and syne left it as quick, and he flung down the siller and walked out of the town house with me running after him. We warsled through that winter, God kens how, and it's near a pleasure to me think o' it now, for rain or no rain I can never be reduced to sich straits again. The farmer crossed the water without using the stilts which were no longer necessary, and I little thought, as I returned to the schoolhouse, what terrible things were to happen before he could offer me his snuff-mull again. Serious as his talk had been, it was neither of drought nor of the incident at the Spittal that I sat down to think. My anxiety about Gavin came back to me until I was like a man imprisoned between walls of his own building. It may be that my presentiments of the afternoon looked gloomier now than they were, because I cannot return to them save over a night of agony, black enough to darken any time connected with it. Perhaps my spirits only fell as the wind rose, for wind ever takes me back to Harvie, and when I think of Harvie my thoughts are of the saddest. I know that I sat for some hours, now seeing Gavin pay the penalty of marrying the Egyptian, and again drifting back to my days with Margaret, until the wind took to playing tricks with me, so that I heard Adam Dishart enter our home by the sea every time the schoolhouse door shook. I became used to the illusion after starting several times, and thus when the door did open, about 7 o'clock, it was only the wind rushing to my fire like a shivering dog that made me turn my head. Then I saw the Egyptian staring at me, and though her sudden appearance on my threshold was a strange thing, I forgot it in the whiteness of her face. She was looking at me like one who had asked a question of life or death, and stopped her heart for the reply. "What is it?" I cried, and for a moment I believed I was glad she did not answer. She seemed to have told me already as much as I could bear. "He has not heard," she said aloud in an expressionless voice, and turning would have slipped away without another word. "Is anyone dead?" I asked, seizing her hands and letting them fall, they were so clammy. She nodded, and trying to speak, could not. "He is dead," she said at last in a whisper. "Mr. Dishart is dead," and she sat down quietly. At that I covered my face, crying, "God help Margaret!" And then she rose, saying fiercely, so that I drew back from her, "There is no Margaret. He only cared for me." "She is his mother," I said hoarsely, and then she smiled to me, so that I thought her a harmless, mad thing. "He was killed by a piper called Lauchlan Campbell," she said, looking up at me suddenly. "It was my fault. Poor Margaret," I wailed. "And poor Babbie," she entreated pathetically. "Will no one say poor Babbie?" End of chapter 26.